I opened my mouth to tell Marcus to leave one last time, but before I could speak, a calm voice echoed through the foyer behind him. "That is enough." Marcus froze. I looked past him and saw Clara standing near the staircase, dressed in another sharp dark suit, holding a folder against her chest like she had walked into court instead of a family disaster. I had never been so relieved to see another human being in my life. Marcus turned slowly, swaying slightly from the alcohol, and laughed under his breath. "Well, look who showed up, the estate watchdog." Clara did not react. Her expression stayed cold and unreadable as she stepped closer. "You are trespassing on private property, Marcus. If you do not leave immediately, the police will be here within 10 minutes. I suggest you think carefully before creating a public scene while intoxicated." Marcus scoffed, but I saw uncertainty flicker across his face. He looked around the mansion one more time, his eyes filled with bitterness so intense it almost looked painful. Then he pointed at me again, his voice lower now, dangerous. "This family is never going to let you keep this, Sophia. You think you won something, but all you did was paint a target on your back." Then he stormed toward the door, slamming it hard enough to shake the glass panels beside it. Silence rushed back into the house, so suddenly my knees almost gave out. Clara watched the door for a moment before turning to me carefully. "Are you alright?" I nodded even though I was trembling barely. She walked into the living room and motioned for me to sit down. I noticed something different about her expression this time, less professional, more concerned. She placed the folder on the coffee table and looked directly at me. "I did not want to tell you everything immediately because Samuel feared it would overwhelm you. But after today, I think you deserve the truth." My stomach tightened. "What truth?" Clara opened the folder slowly. Inside were photographs, printed emails, copies of financial records, and handwritten notes. I leaned forward, confused, until I saw one photo that made my blood run cold. It was Richard standing outside a restaurant with my father. Another showed Vanessa getting into Diane's car weeks before the divorce was finalized. I stared at the images, unable to process them. "What is this?" Clara folded her hands together calmly. "Samuel hired private investigators nearly 3 years ago after he became concerned about you. He suspected Richard was planning something long before the divorce began." My chest tightened painfully. "No, Sophia, your husband did not destroy you alone. Your father helped him." The room suddenly felt too small. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears as Clara slid another document toward me. It was a transfer record. Large payments from one of my father's investment accounts to Richard Business Holdings. Your father introduced Richard to attorneys who specialized in asset protection during divorce litigation, Clara continued quietly. He advised him how to freeze joint accounts legally before filing. He even encouraged him to push for full financial separation. I felt sick. Why would he do that to me? Because Richard promised him access to Samuel's estate if the inheritance ever surfaced. I stared at her in disbelief. Samuel suspected the family knew more about his wealth than they admitted. He believed Gerald maintained contact with people connected to Samuel's finances for years. When Samuel's health declined, your father assumed the estate would eventually become accessible through family negotiations or legal claims. But Samuel changed his will 6 months before his death. Everything went to you instead. I stood up too quickly and nearly lost my balance. My father knew, Diane knew, Richard knew. Suddenly every ignored phone call, every cruel comment during the divorce, every fake expression of sympathy made horrifying sense. They were not abandoning me. They were preparing to bury me. I walked toward the window trying to breathe normally, but my hands would not stop shaking. Outside, the city moved peacefully beneath the fading evening light while my entire reality collapsed for the second time in 1 month. "Why would Samuel choose me?" I whispered again. "Because you were the only one who never asked him for anything." I turned back toward Clara slowly. She gave me a sad smile before continuing. "Every year, Samuel attended charity events quietly under different names. He watched your marriage from a distance. He watched the way Richard spoke over you, the way your family dismissed you, and he watched how you still treated people kindly despite it all. Especially the staff, the waiters, the assistants, the people nobody wealthy ever notices." Tears burned my eyes again. "He believed you were the only Hartfield who still had a conscience." That sentence broke something open inside me. For so many years I had measured my worth through other people's approval, through Richard attention, through my father's standards, through Diane acceptance. I spent over a decade shrinking myself to survive inside rooms filled with selfish people pretending to be sophisticated. And somehow, the one man everyone called cold and difficult had been the only person who truly saw me. The next morning, I woke up different. Not healed, not fearless, but awake. I walked through the mansion slowly with coffee in my hand, sunlight spilling across the marble floors, and for the first time, the house no longer felt intimidating. It felt protective, like Samuel had left behind more than money. He had left me a place to become someone new. Over the next several weeks, more relatives appeared. Some pretended to care about me, others threatened legal action. One distant aunt cried dramatically in my foyer about family unity before casually asking if I planned to liquidate the art collection. Every conversation revealed the same thing: nobody missed me when I was broken. They only returned when I became valuable again. But this time, I stopped apologizing for existing. I hired security after Marcus came back drunk a second time, screaming outside the gates. I stopped answering Diane calls after discovering she had secretly met with Richard's attorney twice during my divorce. And when my father sent me a formal proposal requesting control over the estate through his investment firm, I mailed it back unsigned with one sentence written across the front: "You taught me exactly who not to become." Then came the final twist. About 5 months into the inheritance period, Clara invited me to Samuel's private office downtown. It was a quiet building overlooking Central Park, untouched since his death. She handed me one final envelope and told me he instructed her to wait until I was strong enough before delivering it. Inside was another letter. "Sophia, if you are reading this, then you survived the hardest part. Not the divorce, not the betrayal, the loneliness. Most people spend their entire lives becoming whoever others need them to be. Very few survive long enough to discover themselves underneath the performance." There was one final document attached behind the letter. A deed, not to another mansion or investment account. A building, an old historic property Samuel owned in Brooklyn that had recently been renovated into a women's shelter and career center. On the final page, Samuel had transferred full ownership into my name. At the bottom of the letter, he wrote one last sentence: "Build something kinder than the family we came from." I cried harder than I had cried the day I lost everything, because for the first time in my life, someone believed I could become more than a victim. 6 months after walking out of my marriage with 2 suitcases and no future, I stood in front of that shelter during its grand reopening ceremony. Cameras flashed again, just like they had outside Richard's mansion. But this time I was not running away humiliated and broken. Richard watched the event online from a federal courtroom waiting area, while being investigated for financial fraud connected to several hidden accounts Clara investigators uncovered during the estate dispute. Vanessa disappeared from the tabloids almost overnight. My father's reputation in the investment world collapsed after leaked documents exposed his involvement in several unethical deals. And me, I finally learned that losing everything is sometimes the only way to discover what was never truly yours to begin with. That mansion, the marriage, the fake friends, the polished charity parties, none of it was real love, none of it was safety. But standing there that morning, surrounded by women rebuilding their own shattered lives, I realized something Samuel understood long before I did. Sometimes the people who destroy you are the same people who accidentally set you free.